go ahead and do so.
Audio recording for this meeting has begun.
Hello, my name is Michael Imes. I have been with REI Systems for about 15 years now. I'm a solutions architect for the company, and I've been working in the IT field for over 25 years.
Perfect. And our second speaker for the day is Keith Murphy, a solutions architect with Outsystems. Keith, same goes to you. Floor is yours if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Keith Murphy. I've been with Outsystems for about 6 months, been developing software in various positions for the past 15 years or so. Thank you.
Excellent. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So, Michael, I will now hand the floor over to you.
Thank you, Vincent. So we're going to talk today about low-code solutions and how they can help government agencies lower their cost of developing software and providing the types of applications that they need to serve the government. So first off, I'd like to just talk about REI Systems for a moment. We're an IT solutions company. We're focused here in the Washington, D.C. area. We've been providing services to the government for over 25 years now. We have roughly 500 people on staff. Most of them are software developers or supporting software developers, providing applications and for a broad number of agencies, including NASA, HHS, GSA, and Department of Justice. We have a wide range of types of applications that we do, though we have a definite specialty in grants management solutions, complex processing of systems for financial assistance, grant applications, loans, and that type of thing. So next, I'd like to introduce Keith from Outsystems.
Yeah, thank you. So Outsystems is essentially what we are a software company that has a platform that allows you to create applications 6 to 10 times faster than if you did it via normal method like traditional hand coding. As the description says, we have a drag and drop interface, and that allows you to create screens and actual business logic extremely fast. It's very fast and easy to read, easy to write, and we'll get more into that when we do the demo later on today. Thank you.
All righty. So first, overall of what we're going to be talking about today. First, I'd like to do an overview of sort of the traditional approaches to application software development, the different ways that the government can procure software and how it's presented and delivered to them. Then we're going to talk about an alternative approach of doing the same things with low-code solutions and what the benefits of that type of delivery methodology provide. Next, we want to talk about just some of the types of use cases. How could you use low-code solutions and the types of applications the government uses? And then next, the exciting part of this presentation is going to be Keith providing a demo of how Outsystems works. And you'll be able to see the actual user interfaces, and he'll give you working examples of how we do things, just to give you a general overview, a feeling for how this works in reality. And of course, we would love to have any questions that you have, so please feel free to type them in at any time, and we'll be sure to address them. So first, when it comes to procuring software, I think the government's first preference is usually to be able to purchase commercial off-the-shelf software. And the reason they want to do this is because it tends to be tried and true. It's been used by hundreds of thousands of customers. When they order it, it's going to be rapidly available to them. Sometimes it needs to be customized, but the customizations tend to be minimal. They know exactly what it's going to cost. All of those are variables that are very attractive to the government. And in addition to that, it tends to be the least expensive approach because the software development costs are spread out among all the different users of that. Unfortunately, the federal government is very unique. Its needs do not necessarily align with what's commercially needed in the marketplace because there is only one federal government. And so when they do some sort of processing of applications, of interactions with citizens, it's not necessarily correlates with what is done in the commercial sector. So they always try to use commercial software, and that's always something that we consider. And we try and leverage commercial software, but often it just doesn't work. for us. So next there are cloud platforms, and some of the popular variations of this. Salesforce is very successful. ServiceNow has an offering. FedRAMP is continuously approving more and more software application services in the cloud every day. So they have a lot of benefits. They have some of the benefits that you get with commercial software, but they tend to be more flexible. So that they tend to be platforms that you can then customize to some extent to meet your needs. And the level of customization for those varies widely based on the type of application. So you also get the hosting and the security for those applications. It tends to be all managed by the vendor. So that sort of centralization of all of that responsibility tends to be more cost effective and consistent. Also, you can accelerate the delivery of the application because so many parts of the application are already available. They can be leveraged, and essentially they're accelerators to whatever the end solution is. But you have to pay attention to the types of use cases that you're trying to solve, because the licensing for cloud platforms can vary quite a bit. They tend to be licensed based on the number of registered users of the application or the number of seats for the application. And for the federal government, that may not apply, where you might have tens of thousands of users who might need to be able to log in and use the application. That could get excessively expensive for the government depending on what they're trying to accomplish. Also, you need to be aware that custom coding still often tends to be involved. There tend to be requirements. The platforms support a level of customization that you can do. Things like Salesforce, you can do pretty much any type of application that you want, but there is application coding that needs to be involved with that, so it's not like you're going to completely get away from that. So it all really depends on the types of use case that you're trying to solve and whether the cloud platform really fits that type of description. So then we have custom software solutions. And these provide the sort of flexibility that you need to kind of meet any sort of requirements. And in the federal government, it's not uncommon to have requirements that are hundreds of pages or even 1,000 pages long, listing all the specific needs of a particular application. When you have custom software, you have a clean slate to be able to write the business logic and the user interfaces to exactly what the customer specifies. And a lot of times with custom software, just understanding the requirements, surfacing the requirements, and the customer having a deep understanding of really what they want is a big part of actually the development process. So we use a variety of different applications. Java is very widely used in the government. Python, PHP, Angular is used as a front-end web application technology. These are all open source technologies that are used, and we leverage open source to a greater and greater extent these days because it provides us some of that same capabilities that COTS software has, where it is off the shelf, it's tried and true, it's been thoroughly tested with a very wide user base, and the costs for that are minimal. Basically, you can still then customize it to specific needs that you still have for the customer. Because it's open source, you can change the source code if you need to. And also we leverage the cloud. The cloud has become increasingly important because not only does it provide this on-demand hosting of applications, but there are dozens and dozens of services they provide where it reduces the application coding necessary to provide a particular service. So whether it's databases or message queuing or business intelligence or analytics, AI, those are pay-as-you-go services available in the cloud that our applications then can leverage, and that's that much less application code that has to be custom developed for the customer. But there are still lots of challenges that come with custom codes. So this is from a Forrester report from earlier, from last year. And essentially getting application coding on time where the customer needs it is a huge challenge because you don't necessarily know what the complexity is until all of the requirements have been surfaced. You usually have multiple iterations of an application, and to be able to get the customer to fully understand really what's going to be involved with it. And so sometimes the resulting application isn't as flexible. And this tends to be requirements that weren't necessarily identified or specified, but the flexibility that needs to be available in the application as it goes through its life cycle. it can be expensive and time-consuming to write these apps and to update them and deploy them. So these are all types of challenges that come with custom software. Software is getting much better at addressing these challenges every day. We use methodologies such as Agile and DevOps to really speed those types of processes. But when we compare back to either existing capabilities available in the cloud or COTS software applications, you know, it's never quite that level of capability. So then we have low-code solutions. So with low-code solutions, we want to leverage existing interface controls, basically the templates for what most every application needs, to be able to rapidly develop web applications. So with low-code solutions, you tend not to need to write the actual logic for the application. Those tend to be controls that we can drop and drag into the application, and it helps alleviate a lot of that custom coding. So some of the features that we get is this visual interface, and then we'll be showing that in the demo later. But essentially, that makes it much easier for the developer to arrange the different controls on the screen and all the different components that are used, even from a logic sense. Those are visual for him, and so that rapidly speeds up the time it takes to actually flesh out all the details for the application. Also, low-code solutions tend to have very good mobile and response design capabilities built into them. Most traffic on the web is now mobile, and that comes with a lot of challenges associated with it. There's different screen sizes, different operating systems. The actual controls for on a mobile device are different depending on the devices, and those tend to be challenges. And having something like a low-code solution such as Outsystems has all those capabilities built into it from the get-go, and so whatever applications you develop, you have a rich mobile interface readily available. You don't have to really pay extra to get that done. And then low-code solutions, they're really designed to interface with lots of different systems. So those could be legacy systems, whether they're different databases or data warehouses. They can consume APIs from the other parts of your applications, and they also provide APIs. So it can be just a sort of a Lego plug-and-play block for part of a larger system, which tends to be very much part of what the government is involved with, because they have these large complex systems. And even if the individual system is not that complex, it may need to interact with other systems, with that agency or other government agencies, or even systems and on the internet, like social media systems, those types of communication. Business logic is a particularly big area because you tend to have complex systems with lots of different steps, lots of different decision points, and the drop and drag interface of the drag and drop interface of low-code solutions tend to make that easier to be able to map those different rules together. And then also low-code solutions have a lot of the tools and technologies that are common to all applications easily coded already, so that you don't need to write the scaffolding for those types of applications. So the provisioning of users and roles, pretty much all applications are going to need that, and it has that already built into it to make it very easy for developers. So compliance with federal regulations is a big deal for the federal government. One of the big ones that we work with all the time is 508 web accessibility. Now, low-code solutions has no silver bullet for that. It is still up to the developers to pick the right screen colors, to make sure that there's visual representations of things that are discussed via audio feedback and that type of stuff for anything developed for a low-code solution. But you still have, developers still have all the access to the tools, the underlying tools, to be able to make that compliant as they need to. So whether it's HTML, CSS, JavaScript, they still have full control of all those types of things to be able to make sure that it is compliant. So when you're talking about low-code solutions, you need to consider a number of factors. One is FISMA. It needs to, all systems in the federal government have a particular security categorization associated with them, low, medium, or high, and those map to a number of security controls. And so all of those still apply if it's a low-code solution, though it can help help with those because a lot of those can be centralized. FedRAMP, you're going to need to host your application someplace, and likely these days it's going to be hosted in the cloud someplace. So you want to be aware of how you want to host it and whether that's going to be a FedRAMP compliant system. Agencies have their technologies approved list, and so you need to be cognizant of what software you're using and if it's already on the approved list for your particular agency. And also you need to be aware of how you're going to be getting the software from development to production. Software developers, this is the task that developers take care of, but there's essentially there's the version control for the code. It needs to be tested, and there's automated testing for that. It tends to get promoted to different environments. You tend to have dedicated environments for stakeholders to test the application. And so you want to be aware of how all those going to be used within a low-code environment. So low-code environments tend to be available both as a PaaS, a platform as a service. In those types of situations, the provider, such as Outsystems, hosts their own version of it, and people essentially pay as you go to use that as a system hosted within their cloud environments. Outsystems is not currently FedRAMP approved, so we would use a second option for Outsystems of hosting it within the particular cloud environment. Again, this could be within AWS where everything's virtualized. This could be in a data center with either like a VMware or as what are called bare metal servers, physical servers. But to be able to meet the FSMA requirements, you're going to want to have full control over the software, and so that means hosting it within your own environment. So when low-code solutions, they simplify what the application code that gets generated, but that application code is still used. They're not generating a brand new language, so they're tending to be using the tools that agencies are already familiar with. So with Outsystems, it uses Microsoft.NET and C# as the underlying languages, and so when you've developed your application with Outsystems, the output of that is still the same .NET that your other applications, if you're a Microsoft shop, are already using. And similarly, there are solutions out there that use Java as the base language for their low-code solution. So if your agency has a particular desire, they tend to be a .NET shop. They have a lot of technicians and a preference for .NET applications. That would be one of the considerations that you want to think about when you select your low-code platform. And then hosting the application. Because they're using these same common languages, the tools that you use to serve this code to the application to the public are the same tools that you're already using already. So in the case of Outsystems, it uses Microsoft IIS to serve the application. So you have confidence that that's already going to be on your approved software list. So you want to make sure that you get all the functionality that you need to get from development to production. And what this means is there's a lot of steps that have to be involved to get from the developer's workstation where they're coding the application through testing and production. And there's a whole ecosystem of tools. In Java, we use things called like Maven that are called build tools to build the Java application packages. And then we have to test them with testing software like JUnit and Selenium, and there's all sorts of different tools that are standard processes that developers use. With low-code solutions, a lot of that is already built into the application itself. So that tremendously lowers sort of the knowledge that's needed by the developers to manage all the different underlying components to get it to production. And so that sort of simplification, again, lowers costs, lowers complexity, makes it easier to staff and maintain these projects. So the benefits that you get, the simplification from low-code solutions, it's going to save you time and it's going to save you money. The two biggest factors associated with custom coding solutions, it really addresses those head-on. Also, you're going to have fewer bugs. If you have less code, you're going to have fewer bugs. It's just that simple. And so because the developers are working really more with logic sort of items, the underlying code, they don't have to manually write that as much, and that means fewer mistakes, fewer things that are going to lead to vulnerabilities. There's a low learning curve involved. This is not a dedicated language that only a small group of people in IT have learned about. This is using sort of, if you have an understanding of computer science and you've written programs before, you're able to work in this environment very easily. So that sort of removing of specialization helps a lot. We talked about mobility. Again, these applications tend to have great ability to provide mobile interfaces for iPhones, for Android devices, etc. And then they also simplify how you're going to get from their development environment through test and through deploy. These tend to be almost one-click applications within tools like Outsystems, whereas if you're doing this in a custom coding environment, you're going to be spending days or weeks just setting up all the software and all the interconnections necessary to maintain that for the life of the application development. So next, we'd like to talk about how you can use low-code solutions, different use cases for those. So basically, this falls into three buckets. These are very big buckets, but just generally talking about them. So we have citizen engagement apps. Essentially, these are public-facing websites. And with these public-facing websites, we need to be able to scale to be able to handle, hundreds of thousands of users or millions of users very quickly and efficiently. We need to be able to have, again, use mobile interfaces because so much traffic is mobile these days, and be able to adapt to those different screen sizes very easily. We need to be able to interact with things like social media. So when I have a public application, I want it to be able to leverage things like Twitter and Facebook as part of the normal ecosystem of tools that users come to expect. So something like Outsystems is ideally suited for these types of applications because it simplifies the process to do those so quickly. So in a very big bucket, I'm calling these operational efficiency applications. These are sort of the bread and butter of applications that we do that are on the back end. So whether it's processing grant applications or forms or validating workflows, collecting data from different systems and integrating that together, maybe it's data analytics. All of these types of tend to be very custom applications to the specific needs of the government and what they're trying to accomplish. Maybe they're specific to a particular agency or group and they want things tailored their particular way. All of those things are very easy to do with Outsystems or low-code solutions generally because you have these sort of interfaces that you can click together and quickly have them working together and aggregate different systems together to get the unique capabilities that you need. And then finally, the federal government tends to have very large systems, whether it's the IRS or grant systems, what REI does, where you have hundreds of thousands of users that need to be able to use this, and you have different stakeholders with different roles, different processing that needs to be done based on different contingencies and regulations. It all has to be able to be updated very frequently based on the regulations. These tend to be very complex systems, expensive systems, systems that may last 10, 15, 20 years before they get modernized. So one recent trend with systems is to break them up in what are called microservices. And these are basically where the data for those particular individual components of the system are available via APIs. We call those RESTful interfaces. And the main point I'm trying to get across with this is that you may not want to use something like a low-code solution provider for all of the massive application because it is so complex. But it can easily provide different components within that, whether it's just maybe the user interfaces, or maybe it's just doing the data conversions. Those individual services, low-code solutions can exist within an ecosystem like that very easily. It's well designed to work with RESTful interfaces, to provide RESTful interfaces to other services, and it kind of has all the capabilities that you would normally have in applications from .NET and Java that developers are expecting, because it is using those languages underneath. So again, I have yet to find a good case where maybe this is low-code solutions don't provide a good solution. We've looked at we've done this for GSA and for OMB, a variety of different applications, and we have found really more and more use cases for low-code solutions as we look at it and use it every day. So next, I'd like to swing it back over to Keith, and he's going to give us an actual demonstration of how this all works.
All right, thank you, Michael. Let me just take a second just to share my screen here. And, okay. All right, I think we have this right. We should all be looking at an email, a pretend email that I have from our HR department. Can someone else who's a presenter just confirm I'm sharing the right monitor quick before I can?
Yep, it looks just good.
Beautiful, thank you. So, hi everybody. Again, Keith Murphy here. I wanted to do sort of a slightly interactive way to start this up. So, of course, Michael just did a great job talking about what low-code solutions are and what my company, Outsystems, can do for you. But generally, it comes down to creating software that is enterprise-ready fast. That's the 10-second version of what we do. So for that, let's do a little exercise so we can all sort of understand and sort of grasp this a little better. So let's pretend that we just got this email, or I just got this email. I'm sure we are all different kinds of people on this webinar. Some of us may be developers, managers, an IT director, or whatever, but we've all done something in software. We've all delivered some sort of software. So let's say that we got this email and someone from HR just emailed us and said, hey, we have a business unit that is managing our employee data. And they currently are literally sending around spreadsheets to do that. But unfortunately, two people were in the spreadsheet. They both hit save. Now we lost some data. We don't want to do this anymore. So we want to build a web application. We want to have that data live in a SQL database. We want to be able to search for people in that database that we'll make. We want to be able to connect to this via a web app. We want this to be able to be searchable. We want to edit people if we need to. We want to be able to create new employees. We want this able to be responsive. So maybe I want to look at this on my phone. And then we want to do this in some way where the next steps we want to connect to our IDP provider, Okta. We'd like to use RESTful services down the line, but that's not important. We want to do these, essentially these 5 bullets. We want to do this fast. How long until you can get something in front of me that I can test? Sincerely, Julia at HR. So I want everyone just to have an idea. What if you were emailed a spreadsheet along with this email, how long would it take for you or your development team to get a web app that Julia could actually test for us? And so that's essentially what I'm going to do with us today. So I'm going to go more deep into Outsystems and sort of explain things slowly, but for the object of this exercise, so you can see the speed, I'm going to do this a little quickly, and then we're going to go again and do this a little slower so we can again see more in depth of what Outsystems actually is. But I'll talk a little bit to this. So I'm looking at my development environment. So for the Java folks, this is like your Eclipse. For the .NET folks, this is like your Visual Studio. Julia needs a web app, so I'm going to go ahead and click on New Application. It says, do you want to create a web app or a mobile app? Well, I'm going to create a web app. I'll hit Next. And what this is saying is create a template for your app. And so these are templates that I can either create or I can download additional ones from Outsystems for free. And so I'm just going to click one at random. I like the Dublin template personally, so I'm going to choose that. And then now I have to fill in my application's basic information. I'm just going to say employee application. I'm also going to throw an icon in here so I can click on this. I can actually just found this icon off the internet. This is our company logo. So interestingly enough, if you see this little color here is the same as Acme, it's actually going to pull in that color and use that in my application. Just kind of a neat little trick there. Anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and create the app. Just spinning that up for us. Okay, so this is what the developer would use to develop applications in Outsystems. And so the first thing I'm going to do, this Dublin theme comes with this first screen. I don't need that at all. So I'm just going to go ahead into this flow of things and delete that screen. I don't need that at all. The next thing I'm going to do is pull in that spreadsheet. So over here, this is my data tab. And again, I'll go into that a little slower soon. But I'm just going to pull in and create a SQL table with the information from that spreadsheet. So import entities. Here's my spreadsheet. I'm going to pull that in. Now you're going to see on the right, now I have an employee a SQL table with all of my information in here as well, which is pretty great. Then I'm going to go back to my flow where I am now, and this is just what screens is in my application and what have you. And if I just pull this SQL table directly over here, it's automatically going to create a screen and automatically create a link in the menu as well. If we double click on this, you'll see that it created a table, has a search functionality, has pagination if I need that much, that many rows. And let's see, there's already a login functionality as well if I need that. And here's where my menu is being built on the left. So it's already doing all that for me. It already figured, well, if you threw a screen together based on a table, you probably meant to have a literal grid or a table on that screen as well. So it's pretty smart in that way. If I go back to the flow, and let's say I do that one more time, I'm going to just create another screen. It knows enough that I probably want an employee details screen as well, and then it creates a link in between those. So if I go to this employee details screen now, it's going to create a form for that particular employee. Also, what's interesting, it automatically created a link on this first name right here. So this, if I click on this particular link, it will go to that particular form screen for, in this case, me, Keith Murphy. So the last thing I'm going to do, just because this is a quick demo, there is some username and password logic with this as well, but I don't want to go ahead and do that in front of you folks because I'd like to move the demo along. So I'm going to make these 2 pages anonymous real quick. That's what I'm doing right now. And then I'm just going to hit this one-click publish, and this puts it on the development environment so I can actually give, hopefully, a link to Julia to test. So I'm going to go ahead and click this, and I want to show you the bottom left of the screen. Michael mentioned that this isn't some strange language that you've never heard of before. I'm sure what I'm doing seems strange because it's all drag and drop and what have you, but what it's actually building is an ASP.NET C# code application. It's creating all the SQL scripts that I need, and it's updating the SQL Server database that Outsystems uses, and it deploys all of this as compiled .NET code, and it has that sitting as a web application on an IIS server. So that's what it's doing now, so we have to give that a moment to do all those DevOps kind of things. But after that's done, we'll be able to go ahead and test this and see if I messed up any steps or if we can give this to Julie and be all set. So we're going to just give that one more moment. Okay, so now the green one has become a blue open in browsers icon here. And I'll give this a click, and my apologies, it's on the other screen. Let's click this open and see what we get. Okay, so here are all the rows from that SQL spreadsheet, and I can go into any of these. So I'll pick on Heather here. I'll just change her name to Murphy, and I'll hit save, and that updated her. I can go ahead and create a new employee, kind of get the idea here, and so on. I can add whatever I want in here. Hit save, and that's all in here as well. So now, I'd be curious to know how long you thought it would take to give Julia a test of, hey, was this what you were looking for? But if I was looking at the time correctly, it took me 6 minutes. So hopefully that sort of gives you the idea of, oh, okay, I understand now. Low code is going to allow me to produce solutions very, very quickly. Now, one thing that is not necessarily low code but really nice about Outsystems is I have complete control over how this looks as well. There are some templates, and I didn't get into any sort of modification of the front end, how it looks, but I certainly can. Well, I'll show you how to do that when we go into an actual fully featured application, which is what I'd like to do next. But again, the whole point of this is just to show how quickly I can spin something up when I'm given some business requirements. Let me go ahead and get out of this real quick, and I'm going to show you a more full-featured demonstration of something built in Outsystems. Give me 1 second here. I'm just logging in to something else. Okay, pull this over here. So this is a better example of something that was really fully featured and built on Outsystems, 100% on Outsystems. What this is, you could think of this as a business case of if you had a sales team, and your sales team was trying to keep track of how they were doing, so they have a sales quota, of course, and they want to meet that quota. They want to know how their company's doing. If it's a sales manager, they want to know how their entire team is doing. They also need to log into SAP to get things like invoicing and how much product they have to sell, that sort of thing. And they also need to log into Salesforce to see what their customers are like, what the opportunity is like, what notes they might have, and all that information. So now you have your poor salesperson going into all these systems and juggling a lot every time they're in front of a customer. So now we created a web application that handles all of that for them. So if I was a salesperson, I can log in here. Actually, this is a manager I'm logged in as, and you can tell that because the dashboard has the team goal, the company goal. There's also things in here like current open opportunities, current orders that I have to approve. Currently, there are none. Products here. And I want you to notice two things. First off, yes, there's all this data here, but there's also the front-end piece. What by that I mean, there's these carousels. We didn't have to code that from scratch. That comes with Outsystems. You drag and drop a carousel onto the screen to build it. You also have these tabs and these graphs and so forth and all these other things that are very easy just to whip together screens in Outsystems. Search functionality, you get the idea. So not to take up too much of your time, I'm going to go through a couple of these screens a little quickly, but I hope you just get the breadth of how big this application is. There's all these different search functionalities. I can create a new order. I'm just going to go into an existing order. There's a sense of workflow. If I create a new order and I give it too much of a discount, it's going to go to my supervisor to approve. Like, of course, I can connect that to either Twilio, so he gets a text message or a phone call saying, hey, you need to jump in here and prove something. I can set that up with an email or what have you. There's also catalog data. This is the stuff all coming from SAP. We can go in here and get a little more detail here. I'm going to go through a couple more of these screens just so you, again, kind of get a sense of how big this actually is. More Salesforce information. There's a Google Maps integration in here. I can actually open this directly in Salesforce as well if I wish. More invoicing information in here as well. And this is the important screen. So if a lot of that was really quick, this is sort of the large breadth and sort of the value of this application. This application that we're looking at right now handles order creation and approval, so there is a workflow for the people where that's important. There's a product catalog, there's supplier and pricing information, it keeps track of each person's sales team metrics, so if I'm an individual person, the dashboard will change to my metrics. If it's a manager, it'll change to my team's metrics. And there's a total of 40-plus screens, 30-plus database tables. There's an integration with Salesforce and an integration with SAP, and it took one developer 4 weeks to do that whole thing. I come from a .NET world. I can tell you from my experience, if someone said I needed to do that, it would be much, much, much longer, or it would take a lot more people. So again, that's kind of the idea behind Outsystems. I just want to show you how a big application like this looks actually in Outsystems, because the little one here that we made is very small, just to show you sort of the power and the speed. But I want to show you a little quick how something large like order management looks from within Outsystems. So I'm going into that now. Before I go any further, I want to show you here on the right these dependencies. Might not look like much, but these are all things that you have created in Outsystems before creating this order management platform. So what I mean is the Salesforce connector is something that we created and now you can use in multiple applications. So you can reuse your code. This is less of a low-code thing and more of an Outsystems thing. So it just boosts productivity, plus if there's an issue with the Salesforce connector, you can fix it once or enhance it once, and all of your web and mobile applications that use it would get the updated code. So again, that's just a nice little feature. But let's go a little further into order management. Okay, so this is probably your first time seeing the Outsystems platform. So the easiest way to sort of understand what's going on is to start looking at the very top right of the screen up here. And I'm actually going to start with interface. This is the canvas here. This is my toolbox on the left, and this is where I'm going to see all of my various items on the right. But everything's going to change slightly depending on what tab I'm on. So right now, I'm on the interface tab. So I'm just going to go into one of these screens randomly. So we saw this actual screen when I was surfing through the menu on the left, and I was on the catalog. But as you can see, there's all these things on the left that I can drag into this particular screen. So if I wanted to add some text as an example, or actually let's add a form. We can add a form, and I can just bring it over here into any container. It would pop the form in. It's already going to be nicely centered, and it's going to have nice padding. So if I look at this application on an iPad or a phone, it's all going to just be responsive and fine. I don't have to go further or deeper into it. Just to give you another idea, I can add some text in instead. And I can just pop some text in. I can add a style to that text. But this is all I do to create create a screen for an application. I just drag whatever controls I need, and then I just change some properties or what have you, and that's pretty much it. It's going to go to the Logic tab next. Now this is where we actually create our functions and methods for the developers. So essentially where we create our business logic. Let me go and find a function that has a little bit of complexity to it. So here we go. So what this is doing is when you go into this particular function, which can be launched, be like a screen, like going to a screen or hitting a button or something. But when you use this particular function, you get all the orders out of the database. There's an if statement to see if this is a resubmission, and then whether or not it is, it goes into two directions. If it is, it'll set the order status. Otherwise, we're going to launch the order fulfillment area. So that's all that's happening there. This is essentially how you write code in Outsystems. And I am a software developer by trade, so when I first saw this, I said, well, I can see what's happening. This all makes sense, but where is the code? This is actually the code. There is no code underneath this. If I want to create an if statement as an example, this is all I have to do. And that's it. So this is writing code in Outsystems. It is that fast. Now, it's fast in its you can sort of think of speed in two ways. One, you just saw me create an if statement and set a variable there, and that was fast. But also, it's fast in another way. If your developer that you hire off the street now has to look at this, it doesn't take a lot of time to see what the function is and read it. So I guess you could think of it as being fast on initial creation and also fast to enhance or fix bugs or iterate on and that sort of thing. It's very, very fast to read as well. Is back out of that. And so the data tab, we did this a little bit when I was pulling in that spreadsheet, but there's a lot of things over here just to know. This is all in particular powered by a SQL database. So all of these objects are actually in SQL. So even when you use that spreadsheet trick that I showed you, it pulls it into SQL, creates a table, and then the actual spreadsheet is never used again. But you can also just create a new table in SQL by going like this and just creating a new, what we call entities, and adding new attributes like this. That you don't have to pull in a spreadsheet. You can do it right here from the tool as well. And using it in your code is very simple. If I needed to pull all the accounts here in this function, I literally just pull this over. And now I'm getting all the accounts after I set the order status. It is that fast. And again, that is sort of the power of Outsystems. I also want to show that this isn't just a dumb database. This is actually a relational database. I can show you that here. A little bit of complexity here, but again, just want to show you that it does have a relational component. So if you have a very, very complicated schema that you need for your application, we can actually provide that as well. I also know that BPM tools are really, really big for certain organizations. So if that's something that you need, we do provide that functionality as well. And you can, this is again, it's just like any other drag and drop. The things in the toolbox change, but you can just create your own approvals or decision trees or what have you. That's all in the tool as well. So that's essentially Outsystems. Outsystems is kind of a big beast. There's a lot of things going on there. As Michael said, we aren't just a code generator. We actually help you with the entire software development lifecycle. So there's a lot more to that as well, which I wanted to show you real quick, just refreshing a couple of screens that I pulled them in. So this is how we actually deploy applications from, say, one environment to the other. If you already have something that does this, like a lot of people use Jenkins, you can still do that. We can integrate with that as well. But if you want Outsystems to be sort of all by itself, or if you don't use a Jenkins and you struggle with this part of software delivery, we can do this as well. So what I'm showing you here is on the left are all of my applications in my development environment. And I apologize. You can imagine with the job that I have, I'm doing this sort of demo a lot, so there's a lot in here. But if I want to move applications from development to production, it's pretty easy. All I have to do is go ahead and start a deployment plan, and I can pick what applications I want to move from one environment to the other. And so if you notice, there's a couple of red buttons here, and that's because I'm having some problems with dependencies. So you remember before there was a Salesforce connector in order management. I could use that in order management, or I could open another application, and if I need to connect to Salesforce with that as well, I could also use that Salesforce connector again. But then if I update Salesforce connector, I'm going to need to make sure I put that new Salesforce connector onto production. This is something that plagues a lot of software delivery folks, but we have that all handled for you. So it's very simple to move code to production without it blowing up, essentially. Another area of software delivery that is really, really useful is sort of is reusing code like I mentioned, but you don't have to create all that code yourself. We have something in our case, again, this is less of a low-code thing, more of an Outsystems thing, but just so you know, called the Forge. And so what the Forge is an open source repository where we have a lot of things that you can pull in to your applications and to use them as freely as much as you'd like. So for example, a very common thing I get asked as a solution architect is, hey, do you folks integrate with Okta? Okta, if you don't know, is a identity management tool. And so, yes, we do. So all you have to do is look in our Forge, find our IDP connector, and go ahead and use it. Another thing that I'm hearing more and more often is, do you connect to any sort of chat? I want to chat with my users of my application. So some people have been using Firebase through Google for that. We also have our own homegrown in-app chat core. There's also some other things that people have created. So there's a lot in here. There are these sort of things, these connectors. There's also, let me show you another thing real quick in here. Where is it? There's also a lot of templates in here. So let's say maybe you want your application to look a certain way. You can go ahead and just browse here, look for some templates. Maybe you like how this looks. You can pull this down. And just like I used a template when I started the application I showed you folks, you could pull this down and use this, and then your application will look similar to that. Now, you do have access to all of the CSS. So if you want to change something dramatically, you certainly can. You're not married to how this looks, but it's a great launching point. Let's see here. Anything else here that I wanted to show? Oh, the only other thing is, on top of all that, we do also have some logging. A little less interesting, admittedly, but this is very, very important for software development. When you have bugs in your code, and you invariably will, there is all this in here. So if you run into some issues with either security or with any sort of errors, we surface all of this to you, and for the developers on the call, you can actually get all the way down into the stack trace as well. So this is not some weird, goofy toy. This is actually creating a .NET app and is surfacing all the logs, everything that you would need to create applications fast, but make them enterprise ready. As Michael said, I also want to bring up that in our case, I can't speak for all low-code tools, but in our case, we do have a cloud offering, like Michael said. Depending on exactly what your requirements are, we also have a heightened level of security called Sentry. But if you truly just need FedRAMP, we do allow a on-premise installation as well. So again, we could, as Mike mentioned, we could be on your bare metal servers or in your cloud if you were in a cloud that was FedRAMP certified. So that's all for me. I'll be answering some questions in chat, but I appreciate your attention, and yeah, thank you very much.
So we have put together a couple of survey questions for you. We'd love to get some feedback from you in terms of the needs for your organization. If we get a chance, we'd like to address any feedback we get through the survey right here in this webinar. Also, please feel free to type any questions that you might have. We have a couple of minutes still to time to address some questions.
All right, I do see we actually did have a couple questions that come in, so let me go ahead and start with the first one here. First question is, how can I monitor how the application is performing in production?
Oh, actually, I could take that one. So a couple of ways. I sort of showed that a little bit with the error logging, but there's actually graphs as well, which I'm happy to show if people are interested. But essentially, when we surface all that to you, we give you a dashboard which shows how fast your screens are performing, and not even just performing in general, but performing maybe in certain parts of the world or on 3G networks and what have you. It also gives you accessibility into if any screens are getting slower over time. So that way you can monitor all that and what have you. And in our case, we also can feed that. I mean, that's just data. So we can feed that data into your existing analytics program as well. So if you already have something, we can just feed that data into that as well. So any of that, either way is good. We can, much like I mentioned how we can deploy ourselves or integrate with Jenkins, similarly we can integrate with whatever you have, like a Splunk or something, or we can just, you can have dashboards that we have out of the box as well. Thank you for the question.
All right, actually looks like we got a couple more coming in. Next one would be, can I use native mobile controls on both iOS and Android?
Yeah, I can take that. Well, I guess it's the Keith show, Michael. So yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
You can use native mobile controls. Actually, so it's interesting. You may have noticed when I created an application, it asked web or mobile, and web app, the only difference really, because it's still mobile responsive, is the fact that you don't have access to those native mobile controls. But if I chose a mobile app when I was creating it, I would have the chance to use offline capabilities, as well as the things that you're probably much more ready for, the camera, the push notifications, GPS, accessing contacts, as well as sort of the dorky tech stuff. But I like for example, SSL pinning, ciphered local storage, so all the things that you would expect in a native mobile app we have access to as well. Thank you.
All right, next question we got there is, how is security enforced in Outsystems?
Yep, still off mute. Yeah, so it's a good question. So security enforced, essentially we can enforce, for example, HTTPS on all screens served to customers. So if that's something that you need for your application, we can do that. We can do the same for, like if you expose a REST API for legacy applications to pick up, we can secure those as well. And again, we have a Sentry offering for cloud services if that's something that you need, and that has your SOC Type 2 compliance requirements for data as well. So I'm not sure if that answers your entire question. We also do things regularly. I know, like your app security checks. We integrate with single sign-on and what have you. And we also do our own auditing as well. If you had very specific questions, we could dig into that, but hopefully that answers enough for you.
Looks like we got enough time for one more question, and that is, I have a large data warehouse stored in Amazon Redshift. Can I use Outsystems to query that data for dashboards and reports?
Yeah, absolutely. So we connect to, pretty much any other database that I've ever heard of. So for Amazon Redshift specifically, I've seen that done with just a simple direct connection, as long as the thing we're connecting with is publicly facing, or if we can sort of VPN to that. That should be no problem. I've also specifically with Redshift, I've heard of people writing code in this case that I know of in C#, and then we took that actual C# code and just integrated with that into Outsystems, so people didn't have to rewrite that. So you don't have to go down that road if you want. You can connect to these sort of cloud databases if it's a NoSQL database with even a RESTful interface, or we can do a direct connection. I've seen people connect to Cassandra, Mongo, MySQL, SQL, Oracle, and I'm sure a bunch of other things that are escaping me at the moment, but that should not be a problem whatsoever.
Keith, I see one question from Diana that I think we have time to answer. If we have both internal and external interfaces, like some are public and some are private, is it safe to be able to have those on the same system? Can you
yeah, absolutely. It's not a problem at all.
Through that?
Thank you for the question, Diana. I'm not sure if, I know it's moving very, very fast, but you can do that a couple of ways. As far as like databases or legacy things hitting the same system, they could all have different security if you want to go that route. And if you're talking about screens, every single screen could have essentially different roles attached to it. So you could have some things be public, some things be private, and then you could set those roles either manually in Outsystems if that's not too much of a headache, or you can connect to like Active Directory or Okta and have those systems update the roles in Outsystems, and then as roles change and things, you could have people have access to certain screens or not. So that shouldn't be an issue whatsoever, regardless if you mean a blending of databases or legacy systems you are connecting to or screens you're serving. Either way, that shouldn't be a challenge whatsoever.
Good, good. So we did have some more questions. I think we're running low on time, but we will be following up with participants, and we can answer sort of those questions one-on-one as we need to.
Thank you, Michael. So, like I said, we are going to wrap up here. Thank you to both Michael and Keith and everybody else for joining us today. We definitely hope this event has been helpful to you and your respective organizations. If you have any further questions on today's webcast or would like to request more information, please feel free to contact Stephen Fink, whose contact information is on the screen right now. If there isn't anything else, thank you, everybody, and you have a great day.